it's Mo Eggert. Do you love college basketball as much as I do? No matter who you root for, there's no better place to watch the games than Long Neck Sports Grill. They've got 3 locations in northern Kentucky, Wilder, Hebron, and Richwood. Each one of them very easy to get to. 4K TVs all over the place, and the sound is on for all the big games. Don't forget about beer. No place has a better selection, and of course, you've got to try Long Neck's wings. Their menu is awesome. Long Neck Sports Grill, a college basketball fan's heaven. Stay late, come often. One of the things we do every single Wednesday is we talk injuries, mainly NFL injuries, with one of the experts at OrthoCincy. The great thing about OrthoCincy is they've got specialists and locations all throughout the tri-state, and they offer walk-in orthopedic urgent care. Walk-in, which means you don't need an appointment, and they've got evening and Saturday hours as well. You can learn a lot more at OrthoCincy.com. That's OrthoCincy.com. Joining me this week is Dr. Mark Yuhas from OrthoCincy. I want to talk about Trey Hendrickson. He suffered a broken wrist in the game against the Browns this past Sunday, and he actually stayed in the game. Now, that obviously requires a pretty significant pain threshold, but walk me through this first. How does a guy play and function with a broken wrist in an NFL game?
Well, you're right, Mo. I think that these athletes are some of the best athletes in the world, and they don't get to the position they're in without some element of toughness and grit, especially at that level. So that's part of it. There's no question. Being able to function in a game after an injury like a wrist fracture or break in the wrist is something that is a collective decision. So there's a lot of on-the-fly decision-making. There are x-rays that are taking. There's speaking to the athletic trainer. There's talking with the team physicians to all come up with that decision. And, of course, talking with the athlete and the player. There are ways to protect the player during the game, even in a situation like that where sometimes a type of brace or a cast or something to keep them stable and comfortable can be done. But there's no doubt at that point there is an element of some adrenaline that the player is going through that they probably maybe not feel as much pain. Maybe they don't acknowledge as much pain as maybe they will feel after the game as well.
Do wrist fractures ever require surgery?
Absolutely. The wrist fractures, the wrist is a really complex joint in the way that it is constructed. There are lots of small bones that can be important. There are bigger bones that can be important that kind of come from the forearm as well. There's a lot that goes into decision-making about whether a break or a wrist fracture needs surgery. And it's not always the size of the bone. There are some small bones in the wrist that don't always heal very well. Like one bone that a lot of athletes may have a break in is called the scaphoid bone. It's a small bone that sometimes has trouble healing on its own, and we have to fix those. Other factors that we consider is the break affecting the stability of the wrist. So besides just the bones, there are ligaments and other things that are attached to those bones. And sometimes that can cause a break to be more unstable than others. Sometimes it's simply a hairline crack in the wrist or a small bone that just has a chip of a break. And those they still need time to heal. The body still has to do a healing process, and it requires rest and immobilizing or keeping it still. But those can be treated without. But there are certainly a wide spectrum. There are definitely fractures that will benefit from doing surgery. And there's always a gray area as well, and it's important to talk with the patient or the athlete about those injuries as well.
It feels like, comparatively speaking, the turnaround time here, even if he has to miss some time, and it remains to be seen if that's going to be the case, but it feels like the turnaround time here is relatively quick. Why is that the case? And if he were to play this weekend, from your perspective, what is the preparation for that like? How does that play out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that when it comes to looking at a break in the wrist or an injury in other respects, we have to think about, break it down into what is right now, what is tomorrow, what is next week, what is 4 weeks from now, the intermediate timeline as far as how it will impact the athlete, and then long term. And we put all of those things together as a physician, as a subspecialist or a hand surgeon, as an athletic trainer, and we communicate all of that to the coach and, importantly, the player, and making the best decision for that athlete. preparing for something, if a decision is made that this injury could heal, possibly without surgery, or is possible to play, the other factor that comes into play, well, obviously, what position does the athlete play or what sport? So in football and for a defensive player, possibly getting the wrist a bit stiffer or more protected is something that the athlete can still function at a very high level, be protected, not increase the risk long-term for injury, and still be very effective. And so that is all going into the decision-making, and that may very well be the case for Trey.
Dr. Mark Yuhas from OrthoCincy is with us. Let's talk about Tyler Boyd. Finger dislocation. This might be a dumb question, but it's not the first time I've asked a dumb question. What is the difference between a dislocation and a fracture?
That's not a dumb question. It's a great question, and it's one that often, without getting an X-ray, even the most experienced hand surgeon wouldn't be able to tell right away either. When we see somebody on the field with a finger dislocation, it doesn't take a hand surgeon always to see that finger doesn't look right, or there's something wrong with that finger. But a dislocation is purely a joint injury. So it can be in any one of the segments of the finger or in other joints as well, where the joint is not stable. The joint will come out of place, and there is some element of ligaments and other structures that causes the joint to come out of place. So it's really, by definition, a ligament injury as well, because the joint pops out of place, for lack of a better term. A fracture is when it involves a bone. So a fracture is a broken bone, and that can occur anywhere along the finger or the hand. And some fractures occur in the joint, so they actually involves the cartilage or the structure in the joint. So there are injuries that are combined, fracture dislocations. They're both together. And those injuries, are not that uncommon as well, besides purely a dislocation.
Could a guy who catches passes for a living really actually play with a dislocated finger?
Yeah, I think that if it is purely what we call a simple dislocation, one that does not involve a really unstable joint, so dislocated fingers can sometimes be put back into place or reduced fairly easily. They're remarkably pretty stable after the injury a lot of times, and we actually encourage a normal patient that's not an NFL wide receiver to get moving pretty quickly. That's important to prevent stiffness. Now, when it comes to catching a bullet from an NFL quarterback, it is a different story. There are ways to protect the finger, and athletic training and team managers, they do remarkable things with equipment and little plates and braces and tape that can make the athlete feel more comfortable. With that being said, I would expect it to be challenging for a wide receiver to catch a slant or a really hard pass. But I think that it can be done, and it can be done safely in certain situations.
One more I want to ask you about. It actually involves the guy the Bengals are going to be trying to slow down on Sunday, and that's Tom Brady. We can put these quarterbacks in safe situations. We can enact rules that are designed to keep them upright. There's all sorts of equipment we can fit them with. And yet a half a dozen or so times a year, I watch a quarterback do something that makes me cringe. When he completes his throwing motion, he bangs his hand or bangs his thumb on a helmet. That happened to Tom Brady on Sunday. He stayed in the game. He downplayed the injury after the game. But on every pass in every game, there's obviously a risk of this sort of thing happening. We've all banged our hands. We've all banged our thumbs. How do you know when something like this happens if there is something as severe as a fracture?
Yeah, a great question. I did see the injury to Tom Brady, and it is not an uncommon thing because of the follow-through motion of the quarterback hitting a helmet. We see that a decent amount. A lot of times the thumb is involved. In that particular area of the thumb, I won't speculate exactly what the injury could be, but a lot of times there is a ligament injury or sometimes a sprain of the thumb that can occur because where the web base of the thumb is, that thumb can get hit in the right spot and bend back. And that degree of injury can sometimes be determined by an X-ray or imaging, such as an MRI, but other times it is the judgment of the physician or the doctor who is examining the patient. If it feels stable, it may be a lower grade sprain. If it feels floppy or unstable, those are higher grade injuries. And, it may not be something that, needs to be addressed with surgery at least right away, but it can affect the performance of especially a quarterback. And if it's his throwing hand, then how you grip the ball on every play, how you receive snaps, all those things come into play. And those are the factors that we consider. It's a very challenging thing for a position like quarterback, just like wide receiver. So.
Awesome insight as always, Dr. Yuhas. I appreciate the time. Have a great holiday season. We'll do it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mo. You as well.
There you go, Dr. Mark Yuhas from OrthoCincy. Go to OrthoCincy.com. I say this all the time. The great thing about the people at OrthoCincy is they've got specialists and locations all throughout the tri-state, and you can walk in. You can get walk-in orthopedic urgent care with evening and Saturday hours in Edgewood and Eastgate. It's easier and definitely cheaper than going to an ER when you've got an urgent orthopedic injury. So check out OrthoCincy.com. Again, that's OrthoCincy.com. Hey, it's Mo Egger. Do you love college basketball as much as I do? No matter who you root for, there's no better place to watch the games than Long Neck Sports Grill. They've got 3 locations in northern Kentucky, Wilder, Hebron, and Richwood. Each one of them very easy to get to. 4K TVs all over the place, and the sound is on for all the big games. Don't forget about beer. No place has a better selection, and of course, you've got to try Long Neck's wings. Their menu is awesome. Long Neck Sports Grill, a college basketball fan's heaven. Stay late, come often.